everybody. Welcome to Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Choo, episode number 53. My name is Gabe Estel. I'm here with my co-hosts Dennis Levi Leach and Jonathan Getz. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Wonderful.
Intensity in 10 cities. All right, here we go. Well, glad to be back, everybody. Hope everybody had a great week. And tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the recent Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, which was just last week. We're going to talk about Steve Miller and some of the harsh words he had for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where he was just inducted, as well as the Black Keys induction in response to his criticism. And then also, this is very exciting, you may recall last year we kind of created our own Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Choo-ins, if you will, Choo-ins or Choo-ins. So that is our Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And we inducted 3 artists last year: Marshall Tucker Band, Kevin Kinney, and Faith No More. So we're going to induct 3 more artists tonight, which we're very excited about.
Sophomore class.
That's right. Yeah, the sophomore class. Exactly. So got the inaugural class out of the way, and hopefully some great artists will be joining them tonight.
There will be no sophomore slump.
There won't be. No. These are all quality cuts here. No sophomore slump, and we're excited to induct them and get started.
Do we have Kevin Moss here to help us induct these sophomores?
Right. No Kevin Moss, but we've got some great stuff anyway. So let's go ahead and get started, guys. As we'll set up some context here. I think a lot of people have probably followed the issue since it became sort of a national story. But last week, some great artists were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, I know some people have ambivalence around the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I do, for one, and we've talked about it on the podcast fairly extensively. But nonetheless, they inducted some great artists this year. Among them, Cheap Trick, Deep Purple, NWA, as well as sort of the point of controversy here, not because of his induction, but because of what he said about the whole process, Steve Miller of the Steve Miller Band, obviously. And Steve Miller had pretty harsh words when he got off stage. So not during the acceptance speech. He performed like most of the artists do. But when he got off stage and he was asked about what it was like to have this happen to him, etc., he didn't seem that honored by it. Quite frankly, he seemed kind of pissed off about the whole thing. And there's plenty of articles out there. Rolling Stone in particular did a brief interview with him where he really slagged the process, essentially. Kind of summarized some of his complaints were that they didn't accommodate his band and all of their family and friends that would attend the ceremony.
Yeah, they to go into detail on that, they gave him 2 tickets.
That's what he said.
So him and his wife. And then if he wanted his band to come, it was $10,000 per band member.
That's what they said. Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he's going to lie and make that number up.
I doubt it. One thing that I read, and I'm not defending charging $10,000.
I mean, thank God Parliament wasn't elected.
Yeah. Right.
It cost $1 million.
$1 million band.
It's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, though, is a nonprofit, right? And it's.
Does this fund the Rock Hall?
Yeah, I think it's a fundraiser, which I didn't know. I didn't know prior to reading about a lot of this surfaced around the Steve Miller, because the president of the Rock Hall responded to Steve Miller's criticism, and he sort of rebuked a lot of the things that Steve Miller refuted a lot of things. Excuse me.
I mean, I can understand using it as a fundraiser, but don't charge the inductees.
Right. Right.
Charge everybody else but the inductees.
Yeah, and the president's response to that was, Steve Miller sits on a lot of charity boards. He should know that, these events are fundraisers and we can't accommodate everybody, essentially, is what he said.
Aren't they
but it's
like arenas?
I know.
It's like an arena. They're like, there's not enough room in
I thought they moved it back to Cleveland.
Oh, did they?
Have they? I don't know.
For a while, it was
in New York anymore.
Usually it was at like the Astoria in New York.
Right, Waldorf
theaters in New York.
Yeah.
but I think it's back in Cleveland, which I like. I think it should be there.
Yeah.
You know, New York has enough cool stuff. Like the building is in Cleveland. Like, you know, give Cleveland the night and host the ceremony there. You know, Cleveland deserves more love. So yeah. So Steve Miller, his complaints were that, you know, the whole process is convoluted. They should redo. They should just start over and change the criteria. He described the whole thing as kind of like an old boys club. And also this is an important piece as well, he was inducted by the Black Keys, who apparently are big fans, obviously. And they said that he was very cold to them, right? Like they didn't get paid to induct him. You know, they flew out there or
on their own dime, they said.
On their own dime, right? And to honor him, and because, you know, he's meant a lot to them. And, you know, he kind of gave him the cold shoulder and said he didn't even know who their music.
Welcome to Rock and Roll Idols.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't. You know, your idols are probably bound to disappoint you when you meet them. So, you know, I'm really hoping Ace Frehley's cool if we ever get together, but I just don't know if that'll be the case. But anyway, so that's the context of the story, and I wanted to get you guys' take on it. To me, as more details emerge, I think Steve Miller looks worse and worse as the more I read about the story. And I don't know if you guys read what he said. Maybe you did, but to me, it didn't sound like a guy that was very lucid. I don't mean to, like, I don't know his health. Okay, he's like 71, 72 years old at this point, so he's an aging veteran musician. Yeah, he still tours, etc. But a lot of people who are in their 70s, and let's face it, a lot of classic rock artists are approaching that what is it, septuagenarian status, right? They might not necessarily always be thinking clearly. You know, I mean,
well, in my experiences with people in their 70s, that's the time when they lose the filter.
Yeah. And I think
I think he just said what he felt. And I think Steve Miller comes from an era when celebrities could say stuff and it wasn't blown out of proportion because there was no internet and there wasn't
social media.
There wasn't anything like that. Not to excuse what he said, but I mean, I agree with a lot of what he said. We've always felt it was just like kind of popularity contest, and you know, the rules to get in were different for basically every artist.
Yeah. Yeah, when they shouldn't be. It should be kind of some universal criteria.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you're saying, Levi, but when I was reading the transcript of what he said during that interview, I just didn't think it was very lucid. Like, I felt like he bounced from point to point. You know, it was just like, I don't know if they just caught him at a bad moment or if this is how he really is. But, like, there weren't, like, transitions between points. It seemed like he was just kind of grabbing things out of the blue. It was just like this cranky old guy that was like, get off my lawn. You know, I don't know if that's who he is. I don't know the guy. I'll probably never meet him. But I just didn't – to me, it didn't seem like he was totally playing with a full deck. I got to be honest, just from the way it was spoken, you know? I don't know.
Crazy.
I think given what he said and kind of given just what I know about Steve Miller, which granted is more of an FM history. I don't own a lot of Steve Miller Band albums, any. And though the Greatest Hits was one of my Columbia House free.
Oh yeah, everybody had that.
Jungle Love.
Is anybody else like really surprised that he's in the Rock Hall? I see him. I'm a little bit surprised that he got in before some. And I'm trying to be objective here because I'm thinking of like who they kind of bring in, and he just seems like an unlikely inductee. And it's reinforced by his sentiments about the industry. I assume he's been vocal about it for his career.
If sales are one criteria, though, I mean,
don't get me wrong. I mean, the dude.
That Greatest Hits sold like 20 million.
Yeah,
so
and I think
like,
when
tons of hit singles.
Right.
When they announced this list of nominees and inductees, I think I said it before. It it was like a catch-up year. They're like trying to catch up and get like the FM radio darlings that they've like passed over. It seems like they're trying to get.
Look out, Boston! Next year, you're coming.
Or yes, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'll take it.
Speaking of, do we want to get into that? Do we want to get into, as you put it, the Not in the Hall of Fame, guys?
Well, there's a good website out there called Not in the Hall, I think it's called.
NotInHallOfFame.com.
NotInHallOfFame.com, which I just stumbled upon today when I was just kind of doing some cursory research for this episode. And it covers the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and then all of the major sports and just sort of the historic snubs, if you will, in the Hall of Fame. And yeah, there's some great artists that are eligible that aren't in there. Some of those people I think they'll probably be getting around to in the next few years. But yeah, we've talked about this on the show before. I mean, rock and roll's like album sales are the only thing you can really quantify here.
Yeah.
It's hard to quantify the impact or the influence that these artists had on others. Ticket sales, right? But like a lot of shitty people sold a lot of albums and a lot of tickets. I mean, they certainly reward bands that are influential. Like the Ramones never sold a lot of records, comparatively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because they're influential and critics think they're important. And I think they're important too. But do you know what I mean?
And on the flip side, you have Iron Maiden, who can sell out any arena in the world.
Yeah, and
they aren't in.
Yeah. So there's gatekeepers here.
Mm-hmm.
They kept out my favorite band. They kept out Kiss for a long time, because quote unquote, Kiss isn't smart people's music. You know what I mean? It's for the populist, sweaty masses out there. It's not, Elvis Costello and Iggy Pop and David Bowie, all artists I love, by the way, as well. Do you guys know what I mean here, though?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. There's definitely an attitude, and yeah. Well, I'll talk about that more when we get into our nominees.
Yeah, I think sometimes it comes down to what is the artist trying to accomplish, and how well are they accomplishing that task that they set out to do. And like Kiss, it's a different message that they're
Sure.
trying to communicate. But if you're not even receptive to the message, then yeah, it's going to take a while to garner enough votes, I guess, in this case, to get you into such a hallowed hall.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed a trend here, guys, as well. Steve Miller's really surly attitude about being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. With celebrities, whether it be movies or music, I've noticed a trend, right? Maybe even authors as well. It's cool to say you don't give a shit about awards, but I've noticed that most of the people who say they don't give a shit still show up.
Right.
Shockingly.
It's the irony.
Yeah, right. If you don't like the award, just don't. You've got the right to not go. Okay.
Well, I mean, it is like a totally punk rock move of Steve Miller Band to go there, get the award, and then in the green room be like, "This is all a bunch of BS."
It is, but they still took the award, though. You know what I mean? Like, if they were to say, like, you know what, I don't believe in this. I'm not going.
But I bet that those people they end up kind of scrubbing them. Like if there have been people, it makes you wonder if there have been artists that have said I'm not interested, then they aren't going to bother voting for.
The Van Halen brothers didn't go.
Wait a little while.
Yeah.
Wait a little while till his little exhibit opens in Cleveland. It'll be like Steve Miller's pack of chewing gum, like in a case or something.
That's it.
It'll be like, yep, that's our Steve Miller Band exhibit.
Steve Miller Band sour grapes.
Did because I don't think I'm sure he's not in as a solo artist. I wonder, was Boz Scaggs there? Because he played with him.
He was in the original Steve Miller Band. Yes.
I don't know who all was inducted. Yeah. Of the band.
Well, and that goes to another thing about his lucidity. He took a lot of acid in San Francisco back in the day. Maybe that's coming back on him. Maybe that's who knows.
Could be. Right. Well, beats me. Yeah. Well, anyway, guys, let's get to the real Hall of Fame.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Now, this is the Hall of Fame that you need. All right. Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Choo's second class of inductees, the shoe-ins, if you will. Let's talk about those. Last year, we inducted, each of us contributed an inductee, and it was Kevin Kinney in his work solo and with Drivin' and Cryin', Marshall Tucker Band, and then also Faith No More. Now, the only criteria, if I remember correctly, that we've put a lot of thought into this, everyone. The only criteria that we had was they had to have more than one great record, right? I mean, do we kind of all agree on that? You know, like you got to have more than one, you know, like good record. You can't just have like a good record and then a bunch of shitty records and okay records, right? You had to have more than one at least. And then also you are likely to not be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now that could change. You know, I mean, of the people that we nominated last year, if they were probably going to nominate anyone or induct anyone, it'd probably be the Marshall Tucker Band, you know. And
Right.
I don't see that happening,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean, of
Yeah.
the ones that we mentioned. I would certainly lobby for Kevin Kinney, but I don't see that happening.
No.
But anyway, so that was our criteria, you know, more than one great record, and then also unlikely to get inducted into the actual Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, without further ado, let's hear this year's class. And you know what? I'm going to go to Levi first because I have no idea who his nominee will be.
Okay.
Levi, Jody Watley, who is it going to be? All right.
Damn, how'd you know? Damn. No, everybody in the news lately, all the talk of the town everywhere has been a band called GNR. But I'm going to talk about the
And
original.
they're already in.
The original three-letter band, and that's GFR.
Nice.
Grand Funk Railroad.
Good move.
No critics' darling ever in their entire career, but a
Pride
band of
Michigan.
the people. They sold millions and millions of records. They sold out Shea Stadium in 72 hours, and it took the Beatles almost 3 weeks.
And for those of you folks, we'll post a link to it. That Shea Stadium footage of Grand Funk kicks ass.
Humble Pie opened for them.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was Humble Pie at Grand Funk Railroad. Don Brewer said, they choppered him in. And as they came down, Don Brewer saw all the people and saw just like the craziness. And he said it was the first time he was ever scared to play. Like he's like, holy shit, there is a lot.
I can see how that would be a little anxiety inducing.
Plus, it is Shea Stadium, New Yorkers. Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. And so they have more than one good album, I would say. I would say they qualify with that. You know, you got Closer to Home, you got We're an American Band, you got Shining On, there's E Pluribus Funk.
Of the world beware.
Right? And just like GNR, they were not afraid of a cover. They played some excellent covers throughout studio records.
Yeah.
They even had hits with them, like Locomotion, which is kind of corny, but they played covers, you know, back when a ton of rock bands weren't doing that and having success with it.
They do a pretty good version of Gimme Shelter too. It's not that as popular, but it's pretty good. Yeah,
and a lot of people say they weren't critic darlings because of their original manager, Terry Knight. Like he wouldn't let anybody like interview him ever, and then would like take out full page ads in magazines or newspapers. One time, like of them like giving the finger.
Yeah.
And so like they pissed off a lot of critics that way, and
they were a people's band.
Oh yeah, like I said, Don Brewer even mentions that how much the critics hated them. They would read reviews of concerts, and they would mention like songs they didn't play, so they knew the critics weren't even at the shows. Yeah,
definitely populist rock, man, and they're great. I mean, I'm with good choice, man.
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely. Yeah, I root for Grand Funk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and they're just one of those bands of your youth. You know what I mean? They're a great band for anybody to listen to anytime.
When I was like 13 or 14, the first time I heard "Closer to Home," it kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh
like,
yeah.
If somebody gives you those records right around that age group, I think it's like a perfect awakening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the first 45s I bought. Was Closer to Home.
Yeah. You know what? A single of theirs that rips too. "Walk Like a Man."
Oh yeah, another cover.
Yeah.
All right.
Good stuff, man. Good
Grand
choice.
Funk.
Yeah.
Class of 2016.
Yeah, I like some Farner, man. Right on.
Yeah.
All right, let it rip.
All right. I'm inducting the king of the lo-fi boogie, the man Neil Young, called next to Jimi Hendrix the best electric guitar player he had ever heard, Mr. J.J. Cale.
There you go.
Widely influential.
Widely, and J.J. Cale recorded. He recorded After Midnight, like 1966, and he just failed. Like he couldn't make it in L.A., so he moved home. And it was in 1970 that Clapton covered it, and all of a sudden it charted. And
I would love to hear the story how Clapton got a hold of it.
No, right? Yeah,
because
that's unusual.
It's at the time it would have been such an obscure tune.
Exactly.
Right.
There must have been some mutual record company guys involved.
Yeah.
And as of course we all know, or people who in the know, Eric Clapton's sound was very much influenced by J.J. Cale, and they were pretty good friends. Fortunately, Eric Clapton probably helped J.J. Cale make more money than he ever would have made on his own.
Oh yeah,
sure.
He got checks for his whole life, basically.
Yeah. So J.J. Cale is a guy who's been covered by Clapton,
Everybody.
Skynyrd, Waylon Jennings, Beck, Santana, Widespread Panic, and his string of 70s records. So Cale finally released his first record in 1972. He released two records actually that year, Naturally and Really. And went on to record also Okie, Troubadour, and Five that decade. And he was a really kind of DIY guy when it came to recording. And that's why I think he was kind of one of the first DIY recording lo-fi guys. I mean, Jesus, Naturally, his very first cut starts with a drum machine in 1972. I mean, his album kicks off with a drum machine.
That's some early drum machine work.
Oh yeah.
And you can hear his influence like on Mark Knopfler's vocals, and Eric and just Clapton's songwriting and production styles.
And specifically, it was like Clapton's right when Clapton was starting his solo career.
Exactly.
And so it partnered perfectly.
Right.
With that.
And Clapton was very unsure of his vocals when he started his solo career. He was he didn't quite know where to go, and he had no confidence in his vocals, much like Hendrix. Hendrix didn't have much confidence in his vocals when he set out on his solo career. So, and what J.J. Cale did was this, kind of almost like whisper. That I saw a cool quote that said it was kind of lean in music, where you had to kind of lean in to really to listen to it, and I feel like if Cale kind of shunned the spotlight, and if he hadn't, I think he'd easily already be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
J.J. Cale is an excellent choice. I'm going to mention a guy that's not often probably mentioned in the same breath as Grand Funk and J.J. Cale. My nominee is, I guess, the first hip-hop or first rap nominee of the Shoe-Ins. I'm going to go with DJ Quick, a veteran MC and DJ who's been in the game for quite some time. Over 25 years now. And, he's a guy that I had heard him when I was listening to rap when I was really young, I was aware of him. But I really just started listening to him more in recent years, kind of rediscovered him because he put out an album in 2011, which I think is not only one of the best albums of that year. I think it's one of the best probably rap albums. And granted, I don't survey the whole landscape. But, I think it's one of the best rap albums of the last 10 years or so. called The Book of David, which I highly recommend everybody checking out. It's his LP from 2011. But going back a little bit further, he doesn't have like the household name recognition that a lot of other people, a lot of his contemporaries, people he worked with and people who he was friends with, like, Dr. Dre and, the whole NWA crew and Too Short and folks like that. He's probably not as well known as those guys are. But I think he's just as important. And he put out 2 albums in the early 90s. One called Quick as the Name, and then another one called Way Too Funky, which they're great records. Way Too Funky is really funky. It's literal. He is way too funky. And he's a musician as well, which I don't think it's, fair when people say like, oh, they rap, they don't play instruments, blah, blah, blah. I think that's bullshit. But that said, he can play most instruments you put in front of him. He can play the guitar, he can play the bass, he can play drums, in addition to being a really talented DJ as well. I saw him live about 4 or 5 years ago at the Double Door here in Chicago. It was a killer show. He played with a full band. It had a jazz element to it. It had a funk element. It was just really a great concert, start to finish. And I would go see him again in a heartbeat. And I think he's really important. And I think he's also a really good MC. Like he's funny. He's clever. His stuff is, a lot of his stuff is kind of smart too, but a lot of it's just kind of fun and fuck you as well, it's so check him out. I mean, I think he's important. He's really important, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. He's like one of the guys that's overlooked when
absolutely.
They talk about like.
Oh yeah,
like
the great guys of that era,
90s,
the great guys of like the early '90s, when rap really started to stake its claim in popular music. He should be mentioned with all those greats, of that era, and unfortunately he's not always. So
good choice.
DJ Quick is my inductee. So
Quick's
Quick
the
is
name.
the name. Yeah, that's Quuik, by the way. So so check out Way Too Funky and the Book of David, as well as Quick is the Name. And also he came out with an album about 2 years ago called The Midnight Life, which is really good too. So and another thing too, he's still putting out great music. So I can't really say that about all of his contemporaries, in my opinion. He's still doing it right.
And then in the next day or two, we'll each maybe post 5 songs from each of our nominees. That way, all the listeners at home can have a haul mix from us.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be fun.
It's the first time those 3 have ever been on a mix together, but I think it'll work.
I'm ready for the concert poster that says JJ Cale, Grand Funk, and DJ Quick. I'm in.
One night only.
Flint, Michigan. One night only. Yeah, right.
Save the water.
Yeah, that's right. But anyway, so you can check out us on Twitter and Instagram at RockInChoo. That's rock as in NWA, who we mentioned earlier in the podcast. So check us out at RockInChoo on Twitter and Instagram. Like us on Facebook, as well as check out the website where you can find archived episodes as well as cool links. Also our Show Your Cards episodes where we discuss baseball cards that have meant a lot to us over the years. And just really everything within the whole rock and roll Shin-Soo Choo universe is on rockchoo.com. So until next time, when we tune into episode 54, appreciate you hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Peace.